Thanks for the opportunity to join you. Thanks for the question. Many of us were suggesting for quite some time now that we could see a major military invasion of Ukraine. What was unclear would be whether they would just try to consolidate what they've been doing in the Donbass since 2014 or go for a full invasion. On that spectrum, if you will, we're much closer to the latter than the former. The fact that we've seen strikes in almost every major Ukrainian city, you see ground incursions coming from every direction. It's clear that Putin's objectives here are more on the maximalist end. Russia's military is among the most formidable in the world. The Ukrainians have improved since 2014. The Ukrainians are proud and they're going to fight hard. It looks like the Russians have already taken some casualties. But it depends whether Putin's looking at punitive strikes here, whether he wants to send a message to see if they'll concede, or whether it's going to be a decapitation strikes, or whether he's looking for an occupation. He cannot conquer and occupy Ukraine in a matter of days. No, he cannot, but he can do a lot of damage. But there is no doubt, the Secretary General is correct. This is the most significant combat that we've seen since World War II. We're seeing a violation of international borders again by Putin. And let's remember, the two world wars in the 20th century started, of course, with the violation of international borders. And Americans, our allies, should not shrug when we see this. This affects our core interests and values.
Right. Now, Bradley, of course, Ukraine is not a NATO state, not yet. That, in one way, that's one of the reasons this war is taking place. But this is a challenge for NATO. How should it react here?
This is a challenge for NATO. And, it's very interesting that the two things that Putin most complains about, NATO expansion and Western military power in Eastern Europe, are the very things that his actions are most inviting. So it's quite interesting. It's like, Kremlin note to self, maybe you should stop invading and occupying countries if you don't want people to be members of NATO. It is noteworthy, right? He invaded and continues to occupy Georgia, 2008. Crimea, 2014, Russian-backed separatist movement, Donbass since 2014. No wonder these countries would like to be members of NATO. What should NATO be doing right now? They should be reinforcing our eastern flank with a focus on the Baltics, Poland, and Romania, making clear that a 1 inch of Russian aggression against NATO would invoke Article 5 and would be attack against all, including the United States.
Bradley, there's some who might draw a line here between a U.S. pullback in recent years in various theaters, the pullout from Afghanistan, and concern that failure to deter Vladimir Putin now in Ukraine could embolden, for example, other aggressive powers in the world, especially those with conflicting interests in the United States. Let's look at Washington specifically. We expect President Biden to speak in a matter of minutes. What should his message be?
There's some Americans who are spending more time criticizing Biden or Trump than they are Vladimir Putin. I think that's a mistake. I think we need to set the partisanship and tribalism aside and focus on the real villain here, who is Vladimir Putin, who once again is trying to reshape international borders with hard power. So the lesson for Americans and allies in Israel and everywhere else is that hard power remains relevant. And the most destabilizing thing we can do is deprive threatened democracies of the means to defend themselves. And I would put Taiwan in that category. I'd put Ukraine in that category. And frankly, I'd put Israel. America should be leading the world in helping threatened democracies deter rogue states and authoritarian aggression. And we do that best not by pieces of parchment that authoritarians and rogue states are throw away at the first opportunity, but making sure the good guys are more powerful than the bad guys, period.
Now, of course, you talk about hard power, but right now the weapon that the West is using is sanctions, economic sanctions, also diplomatic sanctions to some degree. How effective is that going to be against Vladimir Putin, who, to the surprise of many, has already gone much further than many thought he would?
Sanctions can be a very powerful tool of foreign policy, for sure. And the U.S. is particularly powerful and has used those to good effect. But the bottom line is it may very well be that Vladimir Putin has decided, I'm going to get hit hard with sanctions, so be it. What I hope to accomplish in Ukraine is more important than financial pain. I'll endure 1, 5, 10 years of financial pain so that 40 years from now, Moscow controls Ukraine. He may have made that calculation. He may have already discounted sanctions. I think that's more likely than not. And that's why I, for one, have been focusing on getting weapons to Ukraine yesterday.
And how weapons to Ukraine? Just very briefly, what kind of weapon does Ukraine need right now?
The Biden administration was slow in sending weapons. They've sent a lot. but the shipments have been insufficient and belated. We need to be sending coastal defense, land mines, maritime mines, ammunition, fuel, air defense, drone, counter drone, the list goes on. They need more than they have, and they need it fast.
All right, well, give them the tools and maybe they can fight. Bradley Bowman, Senior Director on the Center on Military and Political Power at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Thank you for joining us on I-24 News.